Welcome back to Go Again Gaming, and welcome back to Season 3 of the league. That means absolutely nothing. We have 54 players. It's bigger. We have 27 games. It's even better. And we've got yours truly, Ian Holland, the voice of the league. That means absolutely nothing. We have a game today between Rhinar Reckless Rampage, piloted by Carlos Gutierrez, the other half of Fabritorium, taking on Simon Wasner on the very stealthy Uzuri Switchblade. So is the man with the mandible claws from the Savage Lands, the Reckless Rampage, going to be able to overcome the mid-rangey, stealthy, sneaky assassin, the head of the spider? There's only one way to find out, and that's by throwing it over to the game and seeing if the blood rushes will bellow or if we're already dead.
The League That Means Nothing Season 3 is brought to you in part by Green Tree Sports Cards out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's right, the Yinzers have shown up en masse to support this league that means absolutely nothing. Make sure you go and check them out at greentreesc.tcgplayerpro.com for a variety of TCG events and singles and product, including this favourite card game of ours, Flesh and Blood trading card game, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic. These guys are also the ones behind Camp Green Tree as well, so make sure you go and check them out on all the socials and keep up to date with some more amazing events coming down the line. We'll see you soon. Let's get back to the tournament.
We have... I hesitate to call it a traditional setup on board here. Carlos obviously going first with his Shrek and Shrek's associated hands, starting with a lovely signed full art pulping, pitching a blood rush, a barraging beatdown, and Uzuri, very interesting choice, running Orbito Class, not really a weapon you see a lot of, because I mean, you would rather scale peeler some armor or double spider's bite or whatever. Uzuri, mostly on a traditional list, with a notable exception of that headpiece, the Mask of Perdition, not usually a piece you see in Assassin, unless, of course, they're Arachne. So we have our first random discard of the game, and let's see where we end up. We are discarding a Strength Rules All. Very, another strange and notable include. But hey, if it works, it works. And we have our first Intimidate of the game. Obviously, Rhinar's ability when you discard a card with 6 or more power. Intimidate. I mean, one of the benefits of going first with Rhinar. Normally, going first, you don't want your opponent to filter, but hey, you might just rip out the card they want to block with. So we have a 6 Dominate here. If you can defend with 2 non-equipment cards, it gains Go Again. Obviously, we don't have a say in that matter as Simon. We just get a sink below, sink a card below, and we'll draw. So we're going to deal 2 damage. And let's see if Carlos wants to Arsenal or if he has a follow-up. So Carlos is obviously taking his time here. And we're just going to pitch and send a Mandible Claw. A large ogre paw, if you will. And that's going to meet a block by a surgical extraction. And feels like Carlos is just going to say, all right, that's good enough. And Simon's last card in hand, Sigil of Solace. Very surprised not to see him play that in response to the Intimidate, because if that gets intimidated, it feels kind of feels bad. It's such a free filter, but what do I know? I'm just here to talk. Carlos arseling and drawing up, Simon ticking up that tunic, and I imagine we're going to see either a dagger or a first of many stealth attacks. And indeed, it is a Bonds of Agony. Very powerful card out of Parthimus Vale. One of the big things that Shoma used to take Uzuri to the top of Pro Tour Amsterdam. This attack, when you play or activate 3 or more attack reactions, this chain link gets +3. And when it hits a hero, you look at their hand, choose a card, and then you get to rip cards out of their hand. So we're going to activate Uzuri, which is an attack reaction, and do the swaps. Or are we going to do the swaps? Or are we just using it? We are, in fact, swapping as opposed to using it as a way to get Bonds of Agony. So we're going to hit with Uzuri's specialization, Shakedown. If you played or activated an attack reaction, this chain link Shakedown gains when you hit a hero, choose red, yellow, or blue, look at their hand, and banish a card of that color. So Carlos just saying, yeah, we ain't blocking. Carlos knows that Uzuri wants to trade 2 cards for 2 cards. That's all she wants to do. So why not go like, sure, I'm just going to send it. Also, Carlos, not really. We're in a position to not send it. Losing the blue in his hand, which was that Roden Roughshod, very powerful card, out of the KO Armory deck. Simon going to Arsenal. Carlos better hope that is not a defense reaction, because those pulpings look pretty medium in the face of a defense reaction. So we're just going to tick up Tunic, I imagine, pitch that send packing, and send it, because this hand doesn't do anything else. And yeah, we're just going to send the swing big from Arsenal. Probably pitch, over pitching by 1, pitching a pulping and that send packing. Coming in for 8, obviously. If you block 8, your opponent gets a quicken token. Swing big, famously James White's biggest mistake. Nothing else that has ever been printed by LSS counts. Zen! Who said that? Swing big for 8, blocking 3 with a second surgical extraction. Like, oh, these are some fine block 3s. Now, let's see if we're going to take 5 or are we going to block at all. Taking 5 probably means the Uzuri has some amount of reactions and some amount of go again, or has something else. Generally speaking, Uzuri is a 2-card hand kind of deck where you want to send 1 or 2 cards to 1 or 2 cards. Or, in this case, we're going to pitch a Codex of Frailty. Very powerful book. Famously not read by Brian Gottlieb. And we're going to come in for 1 with the caveat that attack reactions or attack cards will block for 1 less. If it hits, Spider's Bite obviously also has piercing, so blocking with armor isn't really a go. And I think that token that they're using to represent Go Again is one of Shoma's. If you are in TCG Go Again in Osaka at all, fabulous shop. And obviously Simon playing on that 50th calling playmat as well. Gorgeous. And here we have Bonds of Agony with 1 card in hand. Couldn't possibly be swapping this, could you? Who knows? Fairly limited in the amount of attack reactions you have here, unless you also want to flick knives and go down a dagger. Could be a reason to run the Obedo class, just throw it at them. It's not really a dagger you care about overly. And is Carlos just going to say, yeah, who cares? Show me what you got. The other option here as well is Scalding Flesh Bag could be very powerful in preventing any sort of Uzuri shenanigans. Because, we're just going to just nick it up to 6. And then we're going to crack the mask, which is 2 attack reactions. And then we're going to crack the boots, which is 3 attack reactions. So it's going to gain Go Again. It's going to go up to 9. And we're going to get to rip a card from Carlos's hand and from his deck. So this is going to be a full, the full effect of Bonds of Agony. So Carlos, obviously, Simon gets to look at the top card of Carlos's deck and banish it. So we're banishing a Primeval Bellow, ? Just Nick, banishing a Sand Sketch Plan. And let's see what Carlos has in hand. Splatter Skull, Strength Rules All, Assault and Battery, and Beast Within. Not exactly losing anything terribly powerful here. Beast Within would be bad because it's one of your serious power cards for discard reasons. Otherwise, it's just a 2-for-6 that blocks 3. Or 3-for-6 even. Ooh. Yeah. We love a Beast Within when it's discarded. Otherwise, it's bad. And then we have a Splatter Skull. So we have 2 yellows and a red. It's going to be very hard to take Carlos off resources. So I feel like the best option here is, that Beast Within. So those 3 Beast Withins are going to be banished from the deck. Carlos is already at 24. But with things like Bloodrush Bellow or whatever, Rhinar has an awful lot of play to very quickly get back into a game. Now we see Carlos's deck running some pummels, some sneaky pummels. A couple drinks. Yeah, seems like fairly standard Rhinar shenanigans. A lunging press. Okie dokie, this man has been Eugene pilled. Anyone who knows famous bridge playing Rhinar main, Eugene C. That boy loves a lunging press. He does the math. Like, the math checks out. I don't understand it myself, but I don't have a brain for bridge. And then, just a quick shuffle up. And then this attack had go again. After all, it did hit. So are we going to be seeing another attack from Arsenal? What is Simon sitting on? We're just passing. Is he holding on to something to stuff a pulping by any chance? I think if you're Carlos, you have to assume that's a defense reaction, and you just are going to have to send the pulping or roll the boots. Roll the boots. Don't be afraid of the boots. Yeah, we didn't lose anything here. 1 action point still. Obviously, the second action point would be amazing with this pulping. So we're going to come in for 6. We're going to draw and we're going to discard. So let's see what gets discarded here. And if it's a 6-power attack, it is. Pulping has Dominate. And so we get our first Intimidate of the game. Of the turn. So it's been a minute, just so you know. Intimidate is banish a random card face down. Simon gets to know what it is. Carlos does not. So we're going to block with a Weakest Link. Signed by Fidem. A lot of signed cards flying around this table here. Now Carlos using his Tunic. And we're going to send that Splatter Skull. If it hits that banished card, does not come back. It's going into the bin. So let's see if Simon wants it. Or how badly does he want it? So we're going to block with a Leave No Witnesses and an Already Dead. Playing Already Dead is an interesting choice these days. It's a card with the Assassin tax, which is, it's expensive, but it is not the most powerful card in the Assassin toolkit. It was pretty handy into things like Dorinthia that was playing we're going to just send the Death Touch. So that's what it was in Arsenal. Yeah, like already dead, pretty handy when you're banishing equipment pieces like Valiant Dynamos or Phantasmal Footsteps, but otherwise it's kind of medium. So we have Death Touch coming in for 6. Can't be played from hand. On hit, give a Frailty, Inertia, or Bloodrat Pox token. It might be time for Carlos to take an off turn here, do a little bit of setup, because I think that's a Bloodrush Bellow in his hand. Don't tell anyone. And Carlos, obviously, with that Squizzy and Floof playmat, love to see it. A little bit of Christmas cheer here on Go Again Gaming. So we're going to block. We're going to full block. We're going to trigger that Apex Bonebreaker. And we're going to gain a Might token. Ridiculous piece of equipment. It's just so powerful. So good. Simon has no reactions, so he's going to take that last card, put it in his arsenal. And Carlos has used his equipment pretty handily. He's holding on to that Scowling Flashbag, which can always put some pressure on your Uzuri opponent. And we're going to send him packing. So this is 7. Banish the arsenal face up. We're banishing a Looking for a Scrap. And unless Simon blocks 7, he ain't getting that back. Which, by the way, send packing, phenomenal tech into something like Death Touch, which can't be played from hand. So it looks like we're blocking with a Spike. I'm not sure which Spike that is. So that Death Touch, that Looking for Scrap staying in the banish zone. Carlos going to Arsenal and drop. Let's see what Simon has to do with his 3-card hand here. So we're going to attack with this Bonds of Attraction. When it hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck. Then banish a card from the graveyard. When it banishes a card, if it has banished another card with the same color, gain a life. We have 2 cards in hand here. So do you take the 50-50 on Flashbag? Do you present 6 block? Really, it depends on what Carlos's hand looks like. Rhinar, obviously very good at straying into the mid-range. Not traditionally a very aggressive hero. He's like one of the slower decks in the Brute class. He's more of a mid-range deck himself. And can definitely take a more controlling role in a game where possible. So we have an Uzuri activation. Carlos has not given a single goddamn about anything that's been played so far this game. And then we have a sink below. Are we going to sink a card? Are we going to see some more reactions? Are we going to see anything else? Yeah. So we're going to flip a Command and Conquer. So 2 damage leak here, which means that arsenal is still under threat unless Carlos has something like a Slap Happy or whatever the brute one is called. So we're going to take 2 damage, lose the 3rd pulping. That's all 3 pulpings that we've seen so far. So Carlos just going to tick up his tunic. And we're probably just going to send some big dumb attack, because that is what Brute does. Yeah, or just a Command and Conquer. Just a good attack. Yeah, just pitching that yellow pummel. Obviously, I understand the reasoning behind it, but it's just a very funny thing to see. So we're just going to Arsenal card, leaving. We're still playing the Uzuri game, which is 2 cards for 2 cards, and it'll be very interesting to see what our Rhinar does to get out of this. Waiting on something like a Blood Rush to have a pivot turn, I would imagine. Yeah, we're going to start with a Leave No Witnesses from Arsenal anyway. So that's a good start. A bit of Arsenal disruption, something sneaky. Very strange. Like, I don't think Uzuri has any ways to give this go again. Razor Reflex is the only thing that comes to mind, because otherwise the only things that can give it go again are things like your Black Tech Whispers, which we have not seen any silver made to buy it back, or Arachne can give it go again with coercive tendencies. A little bit of an adjustment there by our Uzuri player, Simon. With 2 cards in hand. We're just cashing in our armor here. So we've got 1, we've got 2, and we've got 4. With an Intimidate. So Simon, obviously no chance to do an attack reaction here. We're just going to have to intimidate this and see if we get paid off. Because we might just IP our opponent. Always a good feeling. Just to IP them, force them into a unfavorable position game-wise. It looks like we have no reactions. And we're just going to move to the end. So Carlos made a decent call there. Equipment to the graveyard. We have left our opponent slightly IP'd, and we have a 5-card hand. So we really get to start throwing down now. Like, this is when we get to start pressuring. And it's going to start with a Wild Ride, pitching a Swarmonger's Diplomacy. I gotta imagine that Carlos had no other cards to take out in this deck, because I imagine that's just part of the blue base. Not a card that does a whole lot against Uzuri. So we're going to discard our middle card, which is a Show No Mercy. And that's going to trigger our first Intimidate this turn. I would expect multiple Intimidates this turn. And I would be very surprised if we didn't get at least 2. So Uzuri going to be intimidated, slightly afraid. Again, Uzuri, a deck that likes to block and trade favorably, and you're taking away that agency with your Intimidates. A reason that Rhinar has traditionally been very good into Guardian. So we're going to block with an Isolate. And are we just going to take the 3? We are. Then we're going to follow this one up with a Mandible Claw. Pretty good. So we're going to get and sneak in a 3 points of damage here. We have an Inertia Trap. Obviously the power is not greater than the base, so we get no inertia. And leave our... Ooh, and here we have a Splatter Skull. Let's see if we can destroy this last card, or if our Uzuri opponent wants to take 6 and keep 2 cards. Or maybe they just want to give it all up and get their card back and arsenal it. Because I can't imagine blocking 3 on this. Taking 3, losing the card, and just keeping a 1-card hand is probably fairly unlikely to be the choice. Yep, looks like a no block was declared. Going to 20. Losing a shred. One of my least favorite cards in the Assassin class, because when it's good, it's great, and when it's bad, it does nothing. Especially if you can park it in Arsenal and your opponent decides they don't want to block anymore and they're just going to full send at you with 5 cards every turn. Looks like we're just going to send an Enlightened Strike, and we're going to choose a mode. What mode are we choosing? Draw a card. Pretty standard. 5, draw a card, try and get an Arsenal. Again, I could see Carlos taking the 5 here if he so chose. We're going to sink. So we're going to sink a card, draw a card, and take a single point of damage, which isn't a bad spot to be in at all. The life totals have been equalized, and Simon is just going to take some time to try and set up. But obviously this leaves Rhinar with 3 cards in hand and a card in Arsenal that's been there for a little while, so I am curious to see what exactly it is. And we're just going to command and... Oh, it has to be a pummel. Carlos, tell me it's a pummel. Carlos, is it a pummel? Is it a pummel? Is it a pummel? Is it a pummel? Pummel me. Get him. Get him. Put him in a body bag. Swear jar. Like, I'm dying for a pummel here. And I'm trying to keep this one as PG-13 as I can. Because this Uzuri is going to get messed up by a pummel here, losing many cards. And it looks like we have established that we don't care about the arsenal. We're going to take that tunic resource. We're going to go to 2 resources. And it's a pummel, but it's a pummel from hand. So what the hell is in the arsenal, Carlos? This sends the CNC up to 9. Obviously, there's no defense reactions being able to come into this. We're going to lose the arsenal and we have to discard a card from hand. This is all upside for Rhinar. And putting our Uzuri opponent to 11 and taking 2 cards off them. Another shred. Worst arsenal target in the game. Telling you now. The card's bad. And losing an Enlightened Strike as well. Going to 11 in the process. Now, there is obviously some people in here who might disagree with me on my take on Shred, but I very much remember playing against a bunch of Arachnes and stone cold ignoring what they were doing, because who cares? It's just a Shred. I knew they had a Shred. And I just went like, yeah, if that's in your arsenal, you've IP'd yourself for the rest of this game. Now, we have a Command & Conquer of our own looking to attack Carlos's arsenal that has literally been there for several turns, and there has to be a reaction of some kind in that hand, I would imagine. So let's see what Carlos decides to do. Are we going to give up 6 and get blown out? We're giving up 2 blues, an Awakening Bellow and a Wrecker Romp. And it looks like Simon is okay with this exchange, happy enough to take 2 cards off Carlos. Keep that mystery arsenal there for as long as you want, buddy. And we're just going to arsenal and drop. Carlos taking up Tunic. Sending it packing. So it's just been a send packing. I wonder, has Simon been off Arsenal for several turns? That's banished face up there, buddy. And it's a sink below. Perfect hit with this send packing. If you want that sink below back, you have to give up 2 cards. And now Simon has lost the element of surprise that so often comes with defense reactions. Yeah, so it looks like we're blocking with an Annihilate the Armed and an Enlightened Strike. So that's the 3rd Enlightened Strike of the game, and we're starting to see some contract cards. Now, I had this feeling that this was a contract Uzuri list from the Mask and the Black Text, because you need contracts to be able to buy back your equipment with silver. Now, Simon has attacked with an Isolate, so this has Dominate, so whether you block it or not is entirely contingent on whether you can cover Dominate. With 2 cards in hand, one of which we know already is a sink below, but this card does Dominate. You can always block with a card from hand, and if they attack react into using Uzuri into something without Dominate, you can respond then. But let's see if Carlos just says, yeah, call. We're probably checking for Command & Conquers and something like that, just to make sure we see what's already been played. And we have an Uzuri activation. Let's see what we flip over. Carlos is going to sink below in response to the Uzuri activation. The Isolate's going to the bottom. And we see a shakedown. Again, choose a colour. Opponent reveals their hand. If they have a card of that colour, banish it. Taking 2 points of damage here. Losing a card. depending on what Uzuri is called. Choosing blue. Again, trying to stuff Carlos's turns. So we're going to lose either a lunging press or a wrecker romp into the banish zone, and we have a splatter skull in hand, which is like fine. Splatter skull isn't amazing, but when your opponent's at 11 and it's more than half their life total, that seems fine to me. So we've taken a blue with our Uzuri specialization. We've arsenaled, and now it's back to Carlos, who has still got a bit of a life buffer to work with here. Taking up that tunic to 2. Now let's see just how reckless a rampage we can go on. It's pretty reckless there. And we're going to Blood Rush, discarding and we have 2 floating. And it's going to start with a claw. I imagine claw for 5, pretty good. And especially when your opponent is at your opponent is at 11. So we've got 5 coming in, blocked with a sink below, taking 1 point of damage and sending in a strength rules all. So just a casual 13 damage, not too bad off of a couple of cards. And Uzuri, brave, feeling bold. How brave? Not going to 2. No, here's my Justinic. And yeah, we're going to inertia token them. Obviously, inertia doesn't do a whole lot when your opponent has no cards in hand. But hey, it keeps you alive, and that's really what matters here. So we're taking a total of 3 points of damage off of Blood Rush. Not ideal, but hey, you know, when your opponent's at 11, 3 points is not a small amount. And it looks like we're just going to pitch these shreds, telling you these cards, like miserable feeling, to send a single point of damage with this Spider's Bite. It's not really something that we can comfortably block unless we want to give up cards in hand. So I'd put money on this one not getting blocked. So we now have a Codex of Frailty, a beautiful, if slightly illegible, Codex of Frailty. So both heroes have to discard a card and get a card back from their graveyard. Now, if you don't have a card in hand, you don't have to discard. I would imagine we're going to see Simon getting a Leave No Witnesses, or it could be a Death Touch. Ah, the CNC. So we get the CNC, and let's see what Carlos decides to get. He's probably just going to get something that is going away pretty immediately. Yeah, you kind of have to accept that you're just going to lose a card here. I would think, personally. Um, especially because you've been hit by this spider's bite. Yeah, with that spider's bite hit, any cards in Carlos's hand that are not non-attacks are going to be blocking a lot less. So I imagine we're going to see this tunic being used here to send this command and conquer for, a decent chunk, 6. Carlos obviously is heavily weakened by this frailty. Command and conquer, not as good when it's for 5, but it's still 2 cards, and it's still a sizable chunk of 8. But here we have 1/3 of Carlos's life total coming at him, and let's see how we decide to block here. If we decide to block at all, Carlos, yeah, just like I predicted. And here we are just going to send a pack call, a comfortable 6 damage when your opponent's at 8. Not too bad, pitching that reckless swing. So either that's another reckless swing in the hand, and Carlos is a god tier gambler, or he's not. Who knows? But yeah, we're going to block 3, and we're going to. That has to be the 3rd sink below, right? So we're going to cover 7 on 6, sink a card, draw a card, 3 cards in hand for Simon. Card goes into Arsenal for Carlos. And we're going to lead off here with a Bonds of Attraction, which has text that is irrelevant and text that is incredibly important, and that text is stealth. Stealth is the key part here. I imagine we're going to see some kind of disruption out of Uzuri here. I'd be very surprised if we didn't, because that is really Uzuri's whole game plan. Messing with them. So we're just going to block 3 on this with this Whoremonger's Diplomacy. Again, card that has to be in there just as part of the blue base, I imagine, because it's not exactly like mind-blowing in this matchup. Uzuri is choosing to attack react here. Now we're going to put that Bonds of Attraction to the bottom, flipping over the 3rd Command and Conquer. And let's see if Carlos gets blown out by this. Takes 3 points of damage, loses a Barging Beatdown, a red Barging Beatdown as well. And we're going to roll the boots. Sometimes you hit the downside of variance. You take that 12.5% and cry. But hey, this is fine. We're at 9. Uzuri's at 8. Try not to die. This is the name of the game here. I'm going to start with a dagger. Pitching and isolate. Uzuri, again, not super great at converting a 5-card hand, but you never know. So we're going to look for a scrap. Coming in for a 5-go again. Still got 2 cards in hand. We're banishing one of the isolates, so pretty powerful here. Carlos kind of in a tough spot now. It looks like one way or another this game is ending. Carlos going to 3, and let's see what we get from our Uzuri as the last follow-up. We have a Sedate. So this is a stealth attack. So if that last card in Uzuri's hand could be anything. Could even be a boat. So we're going to block with a non-attack and an attack. So the attack blocks for 2 because of that spider's bite, and the non-attack blocks for 3. So looks like we're in a pretty solid spot to not take any big points of damage here. And we're just going to go to Arsenal. And see what happens. So we're going to play our Blood Rush Bellow. Draw and discard and intimidate. We have 2 floating, so this is a pretty good spot for our Rhinar, and always a good way to get rid of unwanted cards that might mush your Blood Rush Bellow into the dirt by pitching them. It's a good fair chance that we get to attack at least 3 or 4 times here. Well, at least twice easily. If we have a blue and a 2-cost here, we can send a full whack here. Uzuri taking 2 from the first claw. Now let's see what Carlos has to follow this one up. Something like a Show No Mercy would go super hard here, because it would intimidate a card and be lethal whether Uzuri blocked or not. Looks like we're going to close the combat chain. And we're going to play a Barraging Beatdown. Intimidating. So unless Uzuri has an attack reaction, this is going to be at the very minimum a claw for 9. It could be even worse. This looks like it's going to be a claw for 9, unless you can block with 2 cards, in which case it's still a claw for 5. So this could be lights out, putting our Uzuri to 4 by giving up a 3 block plus armor. Dealing our Uzuri 4, putting them to 2, which is the big danger number versus Brute, because Reckless Swing is a whole ass card. Don't know if anyone has ever played into a Reckless Swing. It is not a good time. So we're going to block 4 on 9. We're going to have to block with 1 more maybe. Nope, taking 5. Go to 1. 2 and 1 are functionally the same thing against the Brute here, because if this Brute can rip a Reckless Swing, the Uzuri has a 3-card hand, and Carlos is functionally dead if he goes to 2 and can't force that Flick Knives block over the course of 2 turns, basically. So we're pitching 2 reds for a Spider's Bite. So we have a 1-go again. So let's see what Carlos does. So we're going to block with a Blood Rush Bellow, knowing we're probably not keeping a full hand here. And with our opponent at 1, we're just going to try and send it, I guess. And we're going to Reckless Swing. I imagine we're shuffling for formality here, blocking with that blood rush just to make sure that we don't we don't accidentally screw ourselves into the dirt. And yeah, that is a 6-power attack, and that is a brute life, baby. Sometimes you roll a scab skins and you hit a 1. Sometimes your opponent goes to 1 or 2 and they're just dead. Reckless swing, baby. Hell of a card. What a good time. What a time to be alive. And congratulations, Carlos. You move into the 1-0 bracket. Potentially for the first time ahead of Carlotta in the standings. Who knows? And Simon, welcome to the Pablo Pintor Memorial Submarine bracket. As I have said for the rest of the league so far, congratulations on a fantastically well-fought game on both sides of the table. Carlos coming back from a deficit, and Uzuri spending so much time in the early game, absolutely controlling how the pace of the game was being played. Now, if you liked the video, if you liked this game, if you like the league, that means absolutely nothing. Please make sure you like the video, comment below, tell Az how great it is. He's putting in an awful lot of work this time with 27 games to edit and 27 games to commentate, so I'm putting in a decent chunk of work myself. Please comment, tell us how great we are, how great these players are. If you want to see their lists, you're always welcome to ask in the comments as well. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe, because Go Again Gaming runs for the pure love of the game, and the community support means a lot. If you're looking to hear more from me, and I don't know why you would, you can find me either on Twitter at Findles_Spirit, posting very little these days, or you can find me on Blue Sky at findlespirit.bsky.social. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next time.